Part two of local congressional reaction to the Biden impeachment inquiry. Here's Republican Congressman Brian Mast.
The entire Republican Party and its many Democrats across the country, its media across the country, that I think and the American people that are owed a very simple answer to a simple question. And that's what this inquiry is about. $20 million to 20 shell companies, many started while Joe Biden was vice president, that distributed that $20 million to 9 family members. What did the Biden family do to get $20 million over 5 years to 9 family members from the Ukrainian company Burisma, while their son, Hunter Biden, was very literally, in fact, a crackhead? Somebody just answered that simply. And that's what the impeachment inquiry is about. Give us an answer to that. They're hiding records. They're hiding papers. They're now telling the media how to answer. They're telling the national media how to answer in terms of questions like this. Give us some simple answers to that. That's what the inquiry is about.
Should there have been a full House vote? Mr. McCarthy, the Speaker's been criticized, and his critics argue he knew he didn't have the votes for an impeachment inquiry if he'd gone to the full House, even among more moderate Republicans. Does that say something?
I don't think that that's the case. Today was the first day. Today being, we're speaking about this, it's Thursday. Parts of this will play at different times. Today was the first time there was a full conference, Republican conference group coming together. Many people don't sit on the Judiciary Committee, don't sit on the Energy Commerce Committee, don't sit on the Oversight Committee. For everybody to come together and hear the findings, and I certainly believe that after the findings that have come about through August and before, that there would be a 100% yay vote by the Republican conference to move forward with an impeachment inquiry. That's my opinion.
And what I believe I hear you saying correctly, Congressman, is let's look. You're not presuming one way or the other whether the facts are there, but you're saying let's find out if they're there. Is that a fair understanding?
That's a fair understanding of what I'm saying, and it's a fair understanding of the impeachment inquiry process. And there's something different from the impeachment inquiry process. Remember, Congress, House of Representatives, we are a legislative body. We are tasked with doing oversight and very seriously tasked with impeachment in certain circumstances. Now, there's executive privilege that exists with the executive branch. They do not get to claim that executive privilege to hide bank records, to hide different things that they have been hiding to this point under an impeachment inquiry. That's something that makes it very different and allows you to get to answers that you otherwise cannot get to.
Democrats say this is being driven by former President Trump going to the most conservative wing of his party, saying, let's play tit for tat, trying to muddy the waters of 2024. And that in 9 months, the Democrats keep saying and hammering away, not one shred of evidence has tied Mr. Biden to any impropriety or alleged impropriety.
Yeah, so let me respond to that, Michael. One, any Democrat that says that is just flat out lying. We will send it to you to make sure you have it, although I think you may very well have it. There's video footage, quite literally, of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden standing together, conducting business dealings as he is vice president at a time that Joe Biden is very specifically, he's been on record numerous times, that we could send you the videos of these. I knew nothing about my son's business dealings. I had nothing to do with my son's business dealings. We know that that's not true. We know very specifically, you brought up President Trump, and the first time President Trump was impeached was over a phone call with Zelensky and about a Ukrainian prosecutor, Viktor Shulkin. And that Ukrainian prosecutor was doing what? He was looking into Burisma. There is also a very specific video out there of Joe Biden talking about that he got Viktor Shulkin fired and said no money was going to go to Ukraine until this Ukrainian prosecutor that was looking into Burisma, that was paying his family $20 million to 20 different shell companies that went to 9 different family members, that he said in this video for everybody to see, hey, until this prosecutor is fired, they're not getting the money that they want. This is a very serious inquiry about how high crimes and misdemeanors, and whether the vice president at the time was using the United States of America, his influence as vice president of the United States of America, to go out there and conduct business dealings in other countries through his son, that, again, to say was quite literally a crackhead, and nobody can answer that I've found nobody that can tell me what did the Biden family bring to the table aside from political influence, right? That Joe Biden was the brand. He could bring that influence to get paid $20 million to 20 shell companies to 9 Biden family members. And
Sir,
any Democrat that doesn't want to look into that, I would say they're the ones that are playing politics with that. And let me say one other thing. That's a painful thing to say, right? I don't think there's anybody in America that I know that wants to say, man, the vice president of our country was willing to peddle influence to get his non-qualified family members paid $20 million from some really unsavory countries. That's not something that any American wants to say or believe would take place. But that's very literally what has to be answered for.
Sure, in our remaining time, and I'll have to keep it relatively brief, but to a possible government shutdown, will you be a vote for or against a government shutdown? September 30th coming up quickly, and where will your vote be ultimately, and what would it mean to your constituents? Frame the issue for us, please.
Yeah, so how much time do we have, Michael?
A couple of minutes.
Okay, so frame the issue of government shutdown. One, there's not a vote to say shut the government down, just to be clear about that. That vote doesn't happen. Let me lay the menu for what could happen to bring a government shutdown. There is 12 appropriations bills that fund the whole of the United States government. They have to be done by the end of September. If one of those doesn't get done, then that part of the government would not be funded. Some people that work in those agencies wouldn't receive their pay, as an example, to lay the menu on that. Now, here's the menu of what could happen. You could have what's known as a continuing resolution take place for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever period of time Congress determines, where those agencies continue at the same funding levels until all of those 12 individual appropriations bills are completed. That's very possible that happen between now and the end of September. It's also very possible leaving this weekend, the House of Representatives for the Jewish holiday will be back here on Monday. And it's likely we will not leave Washington, D.C. until all 12 of those appropriations bills are completed. So it's possible that they all get done before that end of September timeframe. That's one of the other options. One of the other options is neither a continuing resolution or the 12 appropriations bills get done. And when I say get done, realize they have to go through the House and they have to go through the Senate also, and then the president has to sign them all. It's not just sitting in the House. So if neither of those two things happen, then you could face that third option, which is a government shutdown at the end of September. That's the menu.
And if it happens, what's your bottom line take? What do you want to say to your constituents? Democrats say Republicans are bringing us to the brink. What would your bottom line message be?
There are things that are worth going to the brink for. I'm not going to vote to fund a Department of Homeland Security that's going to take the dollars, bring people in illegally, open up the gates illegally for people to come in, use those dollars to house them, transport them, feed them, give them medical care, everything that's associated, the legal fees, everything that's associated with the hundreds of thousands and millions that are being allowed to come in illegally. I'm not going to vote to fund a Department of Homeland Security where we don't address fixing that. If that can't be fixed, then they're not going to get the dollars. As one example, I'm using Homeland as an example. There are 12 appropriations bills that deal with a host of different things. So there's some places I want to see funded. I want to see the Department of Defense funded. I want to see our military get a pay raise. I can tell you it's very tough for me to fund a Department of Defense that to this moment, not one person has been fired or held to account for the abandonment, that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan that left Americans behind, millions of dollars of equipment, and those that worked with us behind. It's very difficult for me to fund a Department of Defense that does that, even though I want to give our troops a pay raise, right? I want to fund the Department of Veterans Affairs, but these are all separate appropriations.